The distress signal came just before dawn, transmitted across maritime channels in a tone designed to cut through every other sound. It identified a luxury cruise ship by name and position, then repeated a short emergency code before dissolving into static. At first, rescue coordination assumed it was a standard onboard crisis, perhaps a fire, a medical emergency, or a power failure severe enough to trigger automated transmission. But one detail immediately stood out. After the initial burst, the ship never answered any follow-up calls. No captain, no radio officer, no crew acknowledgement. And yet the vessel remained active on open water tracking, moving slowly across the sea as though someone was still guiding it. By the time rescue teams were redirected toward its location, the signal had already stopped. What remained was a drifting ship, still powered, still intact, and already beginning to suggest that the emergency it had announced was not one the crew had survived long enough to explain. The vessel had left port less than 2 days earlier under clear weather and routine operating conditions. Passenger count, crew manifest, fuel levels, food stores, and navigation logs had all been verified before departure. According to the official route plan, the ship was not due to enter any difficult waters until much later in the voyage. No storms had been reported in the surrounding region, and no nearby vessels had signaled collision risk or radio interference. Everything about the cruise suggested controlled normality. That made the distress call more troubling, not less. Ships do not trigger emergency transmission without a reason, especially modern ones built with layered communication protocols and multiple backup systems. If the signal had been sent intentionally, then someone on board had understood that something was seriously wrong. But if that same someone had enough time to send the signal, why had they not stayed on the line? Why was there no explanation attached to the warning? When the rescue vessel first saw the cruise ship through morning haze, the scene felt wrong immediately. A ship that size should have shown movement even from a distance, crew at railings, passengers on deck, smoke patterns, service activity, something. Instead, the vessel drifted in silence with only a few deck lights still glowing faintly against the gray morning sky. No flags had been raised, no emergency markers were visible. The ship was upright, stable, and externally undamaged. That contradiction unsettled the rescue team more than visible wreckage would have. A damaged ship explains itself, an intact one does not. The approach was made slowly, with repeated attempts to hail the vessel over loudspeaker and short-range radio. Nothing answered. No figure crossed the deck. No door opened. The ship did not look abandoned by catastrophe. It looked as though life had ended inside it without disturbing the structure around it. The first officers to step onto the outer deck expected signs of panic, dropped equipment, broken rail sections, blood, flooding, maybe even survivors hiding in shock. They found none of it. Sun loungers remained arranged in neat rows. A towel still rested over one chair, damp from sea air, but clearly left there recently. A glass had rolled against a drain near the bar, but the rest of the area looked almost staged in its stillness. The absence of human presence became heavier with every step. On ships, sound usually carries voices from another deck, doors opening, machinery underfoot, shoes on metal grating. Here, only the wind and distant engine hum remained. The officers moved cautiously toward the main interior access, checking sight lines and calling out as they went. Every unanswered shout deepened the same impossible impression. The ship was not dead in the mechanical sense. It was active, preserved, and somehow emptied only of people. Once the boarding team entered the interior promenade, the scale of the mystery became harder to dismiss. The central atrium lights remained on, casting warm reflections across polished floors and decorative railings. A luggage cart stood near an elevator bank, tilted slightly as though abandoned in motion. Background music was no longer playing, but the air conditioning still pushed low, steady current through the space. There were no overturned tables, no signs of evacuation, and no obvious path of flight. It was not the aftermath of disorder, it was the aftermath of interruption. The rescue team split into 2 units, one moving upward toward passenger decks, the other toward operations and engineering. Standard protocol demanded they search first for survivors, yet every corridor they entered gave them the same response: lit space, active systems, and a complete absence of anyone who should have been there. The dining hall looked even more unsettling than the atrium because it preserved human routine in such specific detail. Several tables had been set for late service, napkins were folded, silverware was placed precisely. In one section near the windows, plates had been cleared from some tables but not others, suggesting the room had been occupied not long before everything stopped. A serving station remained open, with one heat lamp still glowing above untouched trays. There were no signs that people had fled suddenly in visible panic. Chairs were not knocked over, glass had not shattered. The scene suggested continuation interrupted at normal speed rather than disaster erupting all at once. One officer later said that was the moment he understood why the ship felt worse than a wreck. A wreck shows violence. This place showed order that had somehow outlived the people responsible for maintaining it. When the team moved through the passenger corridors, cabin after cabin revealed the same disturbing pattern. Many rooms looked recently used but not abandoned in any recognizable emergency. Beds were half unmade. Toiletry bags sat open in bathrooms. Phones rested on bedside tables beside charging cables. In one cabin, a suitcase lay open on the luggage stand with clothes partially unpacked, as if the passenger expected to continue a perfectly ordinary vacation. Another cabin contained room service trays stacked near the door, but never collected. There were no signs of forced entry, no blood, no vandalism, and no notes left behind by frightened guests. The ship had not emptied in the way people usually imagine disappearances. It had simply retained their traces while removing their bodies. That contrast became more unsettling with every room opened because it denied investigators the comfort of visible cause. The bridge should have answered everything. If anyone could explain the ship's movement, the distress signal, and the silence that followed, it would be the officers assigned there. Instead, the bridge deepened the case beyond routine logic. Instrument panels glowed across the command console. Navigation charts were still active on screen. The helm system remained engaged in low-power drift correction, but the bridge was empty. The captain's chair stood slightly turned away from the forward glass. A pen rested near a route sheet with weather notes entered in steady handwriting. No emergency override had been activated. No crash alarm appeared in the log history. The vessel had not lost control suddenly. It had continued sailing under residual system management after the command team ceased to exist within the room. That fact shifted the case from maritime emergency into something much harder to name. The radio station beside the bridge offered the first fragment that felt like a clue. A distress transmission had indeed been sent manually. The sequence required deliberate activation, not accidental pressure on a failing panel. The mic switch was still engaged in the standby position, and a headset hung loosely off its bracket as though removed in haste. On the message pad, one line had been written and then crossed out so aggressively the page had torn. Under angled light, investigators later recovered only part of the original text, "Still here," followed by something unreadable. That fragment became one of the most debated details in the case because it suggested awareness not only of danger, but of continued presence. Someone on the bridge had known enough to signal distress, had tried to write something, and then failed to complete the thought before disappearing along with everyone else. Engineering should have provided a technical explanation if one existed, yet the engine room repeated the same impossible logic seen elsewhere. The propulsion systems had not failed catastrophically. Main power remained available through secondary routing. Cooling systems were intact. Fuel transfer and vibration logs showed controlled performance right until the ship reduced speed and began drifting. In other words, someone either intentionally slowed the vessel or the system had been instructed to do so through valid command logic before the crew vanished. If a major toxic release, fire, or explosive event had swept through engineering, evidence would have remained. Instead, the room looked active and recently staffed. A maintenance tablet still displayed an unfinished diagnostic screen. Tools rested in assigned trays. Alarms were silent. The machinery had continued to obey order, with order itself having lost its human source. When the ship's internal surveillance archive was accessed, investigators hoped the mystery would finally narrow. The first hours of footage showed what everyone expected: passengers moving through lounges, crew serving drinks, housekeeping carts in hallways, children running through entertainment areas, and officers moving along bridge shifts. Nothing seemed unusual at first, but then,
Over a window of less than 4 minutes, something changed across multiple decks at once. The footage did not capture dramatic collapse or visible panic. Instead, activity thinned unnaturally fast. Corridors that should have remained crowded became empty between one camera sweep and the next. One analyst later described it as watching a building quietly forget the people inside it. No single camera showed everyone leaving. It simply became impossible to find them anywhere after a certain point. One elevator feed became the most examined clip in the archive. It showed a family of 3 entering from the entertainment deck, talking casually, with the child carrying a stuffed toy against one shoulder. The elevator doors closed. For 7 seconds, nothing unusual happened. Then the overhead light flickered once. When the image stabilized, the elevator was empty. The doors opened on the next deck, and no one stepped out because no one remained inside. The timestamp didn't jump. The footage was continuous. Compression analysis found
It happened in a hotel that had been standing for nearly 80 years. The kind of place where polished marble floors and soft golden lighting were meant to create a sense of calm luxury. Most nights ended quietly after midnight, when the lobby emptied and the staff shifted into routine. On that particular night, only a receptionist, one security guard, and a maintenance worker remained on duty. Nothing unusual had been reported. The weather outside was calm, the guest count was low, and the elevators had been operating without issues all evening. Yet shortly after 1 a.m., one elevator made an unscheduled stop in the lobby, even though no call had been placed from any floor and no one was waiting to enter. At first, no one thought much of it. But within the next hour, that elevator would be linked to one of the most disturbing incidents the hotel had ever quietly buried. The receptionist noticed the elevator first because the bell sounded in an otherwise silent lobby. The doors opened slowly, revealing an empty cabin lit by soft interior lights. No guests stepped out, no luggage wheels crossed the marble floor. The car simply opened, waited, and closed again. It should have been dismissed as a routine glitch. Older buildings had strange habits, and luxury hotels often hid their technical imperfections beneath polished surfaces. But a few minutes later, the same elevator returned to the lobby again, opened, and remained there longer than usual. This time, the receptionist walked over and looked inside. Everything seemed normal until she noticed one thing. The floor indicator above the control panel showed the car had just come from a level that did not exist on the public guest map of the hotel. The elevator itself was elegant in the outdated way many old hotels are. Mirrored walls, brass trim, soft ceiling lights, and a floor panel polished by decades of use. The receptionist stepped inside and looked more carefully at the row of buttons. The numbered floors matched the public layout, but one tiny light above the panel still glowed faintly where no visible button existed. It was not a floor number she could press, only an indicator she could see reflected near the edge of the panel glass. When she called security and asked whether there had ever been another level in the building, the guard laughed at first and told her she was overthinking a faulty light. But when he came to inspect it himself, he stopped joking almost immediately. He saw it too. Something in the elevator system was indicating a stop between the 12th floor and the roof service level. The security guard checked the digital elevator log from the front desk terminal, expecting to find a minor electronic error. But the event record showed an actual stop request had been processed. The elevator had gone to level 14A at 12:58 a.m., remained there for 16 seconds, and then returned to the lobby. The problem was simple.